界初のバーチャルミュージアム、ラ・ミュージアムの YouTube チャンネル、ナビゲーターを務めさせていただきます。エディターの岡部です。このチャンネルではファッションやアートシーンの第一線で活躍するゲストの方を交え、貴重な展示作品とともにファッションの歴史を探索します。今回のゲストはフォトグラファー、アーティストのマリーナ・ファウストさん。現在開催中のエキシビションにて展示されている彼女の作品をはじめ、これまでのキャリア、マルタン・マルジェラとの出会い、そして今後のビジョンについてお伺いできればと思います。First off, can I ask you about your childhood? You were born and raised in Vienna, the city of art and music. How was it like being raised there?
It was a very special moment because I'm born in 1950, so it's 5 years after the end of the war. And the Allies were still in Austria, the French, the Americans, the Russians, and the English. I mean, I grew up still with that memory of the war. And then, especially the first, let's say, until 1970, it was an incredibly constructive, creative moment because after war, there's always this enthusiasm about life and things are invented and created newly. And so it was a very creative mood. Of course, there's the whole art, music, and architecture and painting and all this memory before the first part of the 20th century. But then in the 50s and 60s, it was extremely creative, very progressive, very rebellious, very subversive and very inspiring, crazy. I mean, happenings were invented and it was an incredible underground kind of inspiring mood. Mm-hmm. That's also my link. I have to say this immediately. That was also my link, this kind of somehow subversive moment when I heard about Margiela in Paris at the end of the 80s, that the fashion designer made a fashion show in a no man's land spot outside of the city on, with people from the neighborhood coming and saying, it sounded so inspiring because of this performance and underground mood that was the first thing that made me so interested. So I grew up in Vienna with my mother had an open house. My parents had an open house. People came, artists, writers, philosophers, actors. And of course, as a child, I took a lot in of all these people. I listened a lot and I grew up in this very artistic atmosphere, which certainly formed me a lot. But I did not yet consider myself at all artistic. That came later.
It must have been an exciting time, especially in the 50s and the 60s, yes. As you mentioned. That's the time the society has completely changed and the culture, fashion, and art changed also followingly. Becoming an artist or creator was always in your mind at a young age, or was there a certain moment you decided to become initially a photographer?
No, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was a big rebel myself. School time was terrible for me. And I was thrown out of 5 schools, I think. Already very small, I threw myself into it was raining and there was rain. It was very wet on the street when my nanny wanted to bring me to school. And I threw myself into the water kind of thing on the street so that I couldn't go to school. Okay, so school was a disaster for me, unfortunately. When children rebel, there's always a reason. It meant also I'm not doing so well. But anyway, so school time was terrible. But parallelly, as I said, I had all this life with all these people. And I really dropped into photography. I wanted to do film editing before. When I was 18 or 17, people asked me what to want to do. I really didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I didn't know at all what I wanted to do in life. And I didn't have a very strong ambition. And I thought, maybe I could assist in a photographer studio or so. Because my parents considered after my school finishing, the matura, you call it matura. In France, it's baccalaureate. I should work. I didn't really want to work, but I did take photos from the age of 15, 16 on. I began to take photos with my mother's camera. And I learned a little bit darkroom of a friend to print photos. And then a friend of my father's, a musician, Kurt List, came one day, and then this friend of my father's, had read in a newspaper that they're looking for a photographer. A newspaper like Le Monde in Paris, a daily newspaper. It's called Die Presse. And I presented myself there. They took me for 3 months test as a photographer. And with 18, I was a photo reporter. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is things that today would probably not be possible anymore in this way, but it was very lucky. And so I began to photograph politicians, theater, accidents, sports. I covered all the subjects that you have in a newspaper. That's how I began to drop into photography.
You started working as a journalistic photographer first, then after you started working for architecture and
Yes.
landscapes, working for Architectural Digest to be, for example, what
Yes.
has made you decide on this shift?
My first personal work as a photographer that I made for myself was in 1972 when I heard about the bunkers that were remained from the war on the Atlantic coast in France. Because these bunkers, these very strong constructions, they cannot take them away, they cannot destroy them because they need so much dynamite that everything around would explode. So they left them on the sand coast. So the coast, the Atlantic coast in France is full of these bunkers, and sometimes they slide down with the sand and sometimes they disappear in the sea, and when the sea retracts they appear partly. So I loved this description and I thought I want to do this, and that was my first personal work, and I made a whole series on these bunkers, which are architecturally also quite interesting. So was this idea came up that it would be possible to photograph architecture, because the bunkers are a certain type of architecture, but interior architecture, so interiors basically. And that's how I began to do this. I did it as to earn the basic income. I needed to earn money, but it was not something, actually at the beginning it was not my world at all. So I adapted to it over many, many years. And at the end, I had really joy with it. And actually, I learned a lot about space and light and object. It was quite an interesting school at the same time. So that became, I worked for Italian Harper's Bazaar, and then came Architectural Digest USA, and then also Architectural Digest Germany, actually.
I saw your works for Architectural Digest of your interior photos, and I was quite surprised as compared to your works with, for example, this Margiela collection, it was
Yeah.
quite different. Like the interior pictures were very clear and very elegant, I would say. The photographic style is very different. How do you see the difference between journalistic photos and interior, landscape, fashion, and artistic photo yourself?
Yeah. Well, it's a big field. How to say, my real approach is reportage, this like with a small camera. Today it's the iPhone, which is actually great for many. I do a series with the iPhone today. It's fantastic because you have this flexibility. And the small camera, I worked with Nikon. It was great because you have a very different view on things. And the interior photography I made with a studio camera, with a 4x5 studio camera. So this is already a very different approach to the world because it's not spontaneous. It takes time. It's like a tableau, like a painting in a certain thing, composed. And the other one is a very spontaneous, you react on life and immediate thing in an immediate way. I have very different, I never was in an interior. Whatever I do with my camera, I have an aesthetic, I make an aesthetic choice. And with the interiors, I also made an aesthetic choice, but I never was ever in an interior where I could identify myself with. I photographed things that were so far away from my world, but that was the interesting thing in a certain way, to be in this kind of contrast and to be in an interior which was completely outside of all my aesthetics in a certain sense, but to make a photo, to look at it and to say, that's beautiful. So it's a kind of contradiction. I like contradictions. I think they are an interesting field also for reflection and inspiration and challenge.
So you started working as a professional photographer in the 70s,
Yes.
and then
Yeah.
later on, when was it you met Martin Margiela? Because you started working with him since 1990.
Yeah. So I made all these kinds of conceptual works already as a photographer, always with my Nikon. I mean, the interior was something totally aside. And then during this time, I heard about Margiela doing this kind of performance show. And I got very interested because of the reason I told you beforehand. And so I decided to go to the showroom. I always liked dressing and clothes. In Vienna, there's an enormous culture of dandyism. So it was always, there were a lot of tailors and people got there very chic, and the belts and the shoes and everything was very researched. So, and I liked clothes, and I will go and look at the showroom. So I went to the showroom. It was a little team of 5 people.
5 people?
Yeah, 5 maximum, I think, at the time. And maybe it was a little more. I didn't really see them, but it was a very small thing. And Else, who was the press attaché, Else Skalfold, received me and she showed me the collection. So I was always already impressed by this show he had, but when I saw the collection, I was totally overwhelmed. by this, something you had never seen before. It was totally original. It was totally based on very historical structures. You saw the whole historic culture there, and it was radically contemporary and nearly futuristic at the same time. So there was this kind of old and new, which was also an incredible mixture. And then there was this very ludic, gameful way to play with things, to have a sweater that is made of 4 pieces, and you could wear 2 or 1 or only the sleeves or no sleeve. So I was I loved it. It was really a moment of like an encounter already. Else invited me to take photos of the next show, and the next show was in the showroom. It was only a drink for people who were invited. Wait a minute. No, it's not there. No. It's the first. No, I don't know if we have a photo of that actually.
I'm
not
sure the first picture here should be 1991 spring, summer.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Fall, winter.
Yeah. So this was that was during the show there. You can see the newspapers on the floor and everything. And so I went
It's
there.
even a newspaper on the floor?
Yes, it's all glued on the floor.
So this is the first season you started working with him.
Yeah. So I photographed, I mingled in between these people. The models were among the public. So it was great also because it was totally understatement. You had the public and the models came and drank and smoked like everybody else. Everybody smoked at the time. So I photographed and then I came back a week later. Oh, this is also from that time, the third photo here. This one, yeah, that's also the same moment. See, that's a sweater I fell in love with, like 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. And then I came back with the photos and showed them to Else. And when she saw the photos, she said, "Oh, Martin must see that." She called Martin and Martin came out. And that's the first time I met him. And he saw the photos and he loved them. There was this kind of collaboration and friendship that began at that moment. And it lasted nearly 20 years. The friendship continues until today.
So for this first season, you started working for Martin Margiela. At
Yes.
this point, you were not physically meeting him in person. I mean, Martin Margiela is definitely historically the most enigmatic person in fashion industry, and I wonder his personality is like. What was your first impression of him? What was the creative process was like working with him?
Yeah, that was fantastic because he left total freedom to me, and I'm not the only photographer. There were some other photographers also. I'm just the only one who worked so long with him. But he gave us total freedom. He told me sometimes he called me to photograph some fittings or some sessions he wanted to do in the showroom besides the backstage. But he left me total freedom. I mean, I never got really any indication or something. He wanted me to give him what I felt. See, they didn't say anything. And he trusted me, which was really wonderful from his side. I appreciated that very much. And some seasons I found that I was not so good, but he never said a word. He always, anyways, I love the backstage situation also. For me, this is a great situation because it's basically, it's not easy. It's very difficult. Or you have too much space, or you have too little space, or the light is really bad, or there's too much light. It's also bad. Nothing happens. Empty space, empty time. And then 10 minutes at the end or 5 minutes where the models are really completely done so that you can have the photo, which is also important to have the final outfit. So it's a very special situation, but it's nice I like the challenge for difficult situations. And this reportage approach is just perfect for that because you photograph it like a chronology afternoon, from the beginning where there's nothing until to the end, things are totally done, like for a theater performance. And then he always very interesting women. There were all these incredible personalities that was also very special, really personality, not robotic models, but women. So that made it also very interesting, of course. And then there's also this thing, I just want to say that it comes to my mind because of the sweater in several pieces and all these things, that what also seduced me so much in his fashion is that he made, or also as an artist, he made fashion where he challenged women mentally, which means that he takes them seriously, he respects them. And you could see these things as objects. Some people collect Margiela as an object and don't wear it. So you have you have an object, it's a conceptual object. And at the same time, if you put it on the body, it's really fantastic to have an object and at the same time you can wear it and it's really wonderful on the body is an incredible achievement.
I'm sure every season and every of these pictures has a lot of memories. I wonder if there is a specific piece of clothes or a model, as you said, or a picture you clearly remember, for example, from these.
I love this collection because he made parallel collection of white and black, and the people who were at the white were angry they couldn't see the black, and people who were at the black were angry because they couldn't see the white. It were two shows parallelly, and I was at the white. And I love this collection because it was mixed with this historical outfits, and there was an incredible atmosphere. And it's not the first time Kate Moss was there because she was already there before for the collection at the Heilsam, at the Armée du Salut. I don't have a preferred model, but it was in after now today, of course, it's very funny that Kate Moss was there when she was 15 or something. It was the first time she was present. I mean, there's so many collections I liked so much, it's very difficult to make a choice.
Right now in fashion, vintage is facing a big moment, and
Yeah.
Martin Margiela is undoubtedly the most coveted designers. What do you think? What's the reason do you think his creation and he as a designer inspires so everlastingly? What is so special about him, do you think?
First of all, an incredible generosity, and there is an intelligence, but it's not a conscious, applied, conceptual intelligence. It's an intuitive, trustful, conceptual intelligence. And I think he's really very good at that. That's one of his big qualities. And then an incredible freedom. Today, nobody is free. Of course, he's a very inspired person. The thing, to take this, we all grew up with vintage clothes, for example, dressed in the 70s from the flea markets. So it was already my culture. But to find these things, like this is the right image for the dress here at the supermarket. Take a vintage dress and to take scissors and to cut in the middle of the dress. Who did that before? It's an incredible radical gestures, and then to put it over jeans and to close it as a gilet. And I mean, it's just coming from so many sides. But I think there's an enormous freedom, and there has been in the fashion an enormous freedom from his side, which was one of the also very important aspects. I think that just the intuitive conceptual intelligence is really the basic thing for me.
Thank you for sharing such an amazing story. So about this museum itself, how does this virtual museum, the concept, how do you feel about this museum? What was your impression about this museum?
And it's beautiful, but I had a little difficult time to get through it. The technical aspect was a little difficult for me, but for the rest, it's very nice. I like it very much. I find the architecture super. I find the idea super. It's very nice. And, but you would like to go into things in an easy way, and the technical aspect is a little more challenging.
So it goes like this. It goes upstairs, and the second floor, the first floor in European style is the entirely Margiela archives.
But then, can you go very close?
You can go closer. If you double click, it goes much closer. Double click, and it goes 360. So this is how it works. Also, there are some related images like this, so like you can go deeper about each works.
No, I didn't see that. Yeah, see, I couldn't
Also,
get to that.
Also, like right now, it's displayed in Japanese, but you can choose English too.
Yeah, I see.
Oh, so here comes the famous Stockman jacket. So beautiful.
And if you click on it, there's a photo coming up.
So there's a tab here, related image down below left here. You can see some related images.
Super, very nice. It's super nice done, nicely done, really.
Do you still own some of like Margiela's pieces?
Yes, yeah, I still have a lot, but of course a few pieces where I knew I will not wear them, and then I'm moving. I have to get rid. I had so much. I had to get rid of pieces because I'm moving in another apartment.
So you worked with him for 20 years. You started focusing on your more artistic side of your career And what has led you decide on that?
I always did my work as a photographer, commissions, No, you say commissions. I like people asked me for something and I worked for them. So that's how I earned my money. But I always did parallelly my artistic projects from 1972 on. And I always said to myself, maybe one day, I can concentrate only on my personal work. And then there came a moment where, in a strange way, in the time of 1 or 2 years, I had 3 main clients: Architectural Digest USA, Architectural Digest Germany, and Martin Margiela. It's funny, it's so different clients, but
It almost looks like you have different personalities.
Yeah, right. I have, but I don't have. And so all these 3 clients, somehow it ended. Martin stopped. Architectural Digest USA moved from LA to New York, and I could have insisted to continue to work with them, but I thought, okay, let's see. AD Germany also moved from Berlin back to Munich, and they changed team. In a certain way, there was a moment I said, okay, maybe that's the moment to stop all this and to And there were 2-3 years that were difficult because I didn't have a regular income anymore. But somehow I was very happy to concentrate on myself. And that's where I began to plunge more into my work. But I had done already very important. I had 10 years of video works that I had made in the 90s, for example. I had already a very consistent, committed work, that I done. But then I got even more into it, which was very nice. And I'm very lucky that somehow you have to be very consistent, and you have to a lot of belief in the disbelief. In the meantime, is also part of it, to stick with it, because it's not easy. It's only a few years now that I can say, well, I really am now where I wanted to be, and it's functioning more or less well. That's wonderful. I feel very lucky.